This is a fuel filter that you can see. I mean, I know you can see it, but when it's installed, you can still see it, which is great. Let's put one in. Here I am at the Caterpillar engine in our Sterling truck. And after doing that video where I had to replace the priming pump and get a bunch of water out of the filter, I realized I need to do another video. Is that filter good? Or is it full of crap? There's no way to know. And this is the back of our Crown bus. And again, is that filter good and clean? Does it still have life in it? Or is it full? Is the filter dirty and restricting the fuel flow through to the engine? Well, again, you don't know. If your fuel filter is clogged, and on a diesel like your bus, you probably have two of them, a primary and a secondary. And if either of those or both of those are clogged, you will notice a decrease in performance and your engine might even quit running. So how do you know when a filter is plugged or when it's time to replace it, except waiting until you're stuck on the side of the road or limping along at 30 miles an hour on the freeway? Wouldn't it be great if these were clear and you could see through them? Well, that's, sorry about that. So that's what these Davison filters, the Davco. I'm not sure if it's Davison or Davidson. Sorry about that. Anyway, Davco, I get these from a semi-truck salvage yard down in Phoenix. And when I'm down there, I'll buy 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. I put them in every vehicle I own and in customers' buses pretty frequently. And the nice thing about these is, now this goes in on the suction side. So this would be your snow falling. These go on the suction side of your fuel system. So you've got a lift pump that draws from your tank, and this goes on the suction side. And it will be full of fuel up to about here when the filter is clean. This one might be a little bit easier to see. So when the filter's clean, it's sitting upright and the fuel level is up here going through the filter. As the suction force increases and the vacuum increases and the filter, or because the filter is getting plugged, the fuel level will rise to go through clean filter media. And as that gets plugged up or clogged, it will rise, and eventually the fuel will get to the point where it gets up to the top here, and that's what this red line is for. This is where you are supposed to then replace the filter. You can also tell if you're getting air into your suction line because you'll see all the bubbles coming up in here. So these are really nice. I like these Davco filters. They come in different sizes. I'm putting the 243 in our Crown bus, the one I just showed you, and that's what I'm going to document. These are smaller 233s. These will go in any bus, any medium-duty truck, just work fine. They make bigger ones if you've got a big Class 8 semi-truck like a Detroit Series 60 or a C15 or something like that. But for most of our buses, these work just fine, and this is what I'm going to put into the Crown. This is the engine compartment of our Crown. And this is an old 2-stroke Detroit 8V71. So this line here is the line coming from the fuel tank, and it feeds to the inside of the primary filter here. This is a check valve, and that is a one-way valve that lets the fuel go that way and hopefully keeps it from draining back to the tank, which is lower than this. If this check valve quit working, fuel could drain backwards because of the suction down into the tank and you lose prime. So fuel comes into the primary filter, from here goes out to the pump, and then from the pump's down here, you can't see it, then it goes to the inlet side of the secondary filter, and this has 2 outs. Because this is a V configuration engine, one of these goes to the right bank of cylinders and injectors, this one goes to the left bank. So I'm going to leave this here, but I am going to take this assembly out and replace it with this Davco, which will sit like that. Can you hear that? That's what would happen if that check valve weren't working. All that fuel drained back down into the tank just now. So I will need to reprime this after I replace this filter assembly. But the nice thing about those Davco filters is they are really easy to prime because you just fill it up from the top. I'll show you that when we get to that point. So this is the outlet side, and these are all marked. And it's pretty common that your filter base will have separate options. So you could run out here or out here just by taking that plug out, or like over here, you can do that on both sides at the same time. This goes, like I said, over to the pump. These lines are a little stiff, so I should replace them. Now I need to unbolt this. Let me take this filter off. And that's about how tight your filter should be. If you put it on with a strap wrench and over tighten it, you just make life difficult for yourself. Taking the filter off, now I just need to remove 2 bolts down here, and I will do that off camera. It's just taking out bolts, and then we can mount the new housing. I'm going to mount this up here utilizing that hole, and then I'll drill another hole over here, and I can access that from the top. I took the old filter element out. I'll get a new one here. But before I put that on, if I can balance this, I want to show you what's inside there. So down at the bottom, attached to this electrical cord on the side, is a heating element. And if I lived in a place where the fuel gelled, if it got that cold, I could hook this up to 12-volt power supply, like the battery power supply, 12-volt source, and that heating element will warm up the fuel that's in here. And then on the bottom, there was a water and fuel sensor. I took it out and put a plug in. And then this is the drain. So one nice thing about this is if you get water in here or crap in there, you can open this little valve down here. Right now it's closed. When that's pointed at the bottom, it's open and it will drain out all your water. Anyway, I like these things quite a bit. All right, this is the inlet side, the suction side. So I've got a short piece of hose because this is a barbed fitting down here. So I just put a barbed fitting on that. This is the check valve, it'll draw in. And then for the output side that goes to the pump, which is also a suction hose, I had our local Napa make me up this. So this screws onto the fuel pump. The other end I left blank bare, so it'll fit on the barbed fitting down here. I love my Napa, but they crimped the wrong size on the end there. No wonder I couldn't get it screwed on. So I pulled this out. I'll either have them crimp a new one of these on or just get a separate elbow. Good afternoon, it's day 2. So this is the hose that they made up for me, and this fitting is too small. They thought it matched the one that was on the hose I took in, and then I left that hose there because it was all like stiff. So I didn't realize it was too small to go on this fitting out of the fuel pump or into the fuel pump. So instead of getting a new hose and making them recrimp it, they're good people. I just got a new fitting. So this fits in there. And then this is the same 1/4-inch thread that goes in the fuel pump. So I'll put this in the fuel pump out there and attach this, but it's super windy out today. So I'm going to put this on in here and band this on, and I'll show you what I'm doing there in just a second. I pushed this barb fitting into the hose. It wasn't difficult. And now I need to put a clamp on this. I could use a regular band or screw type, warm gear drive hose clamp. This is a suction line, but this is going to be pretty permanent. I'm never going to take this apart. On the other side of the filter, I use those spring clip hose clamps because I'll probably replace that whole line up to the fuel tank when the weather gets nice. But this is going to be pretty permanent. I don't plan on changing it. And I want to make sure that it stays on there and it's nice and secure. So I'm actually going to wire tie this. Now, when I say wire tie, I use things like this. This is Malin stainless steel aircraft lock wire. And you use it with a tool like this that lets you spin on an aircraft or some critical components on vehicles even. You'll have a wire that goes through adjacent nuts or bolts, and then you twist them and it locks it so they can't back out. But this stuff is really handy with a tool like, this is a commercial tool, I think called a Clamp-Tite. And it works really well. I've got a couple homemade versions that I've made. They are nothing fancy. This one will handle bigger wire. And then this one is about the same as the production model for wire capacity. It's got a little groove on the top. And I'll put a couple bands on this and show you how I use it. I've got 032 wire, 041, and for this I'm going to use my larger stuff, the 062. When you pull it out of the hole in the top, it's all coiled like that. So I'm going to straighten the wire out. And then form a loop. And these wires go through now you can do this around the pipe or around your tubing. I'm just doing it out here because it's a little easier with the thicker wire to manipulate. Let me show you up close what this looks like. It's just a bolt with two holes in it, and I welded a T-handle on it, and then there's a roll pin here, and then a little tiny notch up in the front. So you wrap this around, you make your loop in the wire, wrap the tails around on the inside, and then through the holes here. It's a little harder to use than the commercial tool. Maybe we'll try one of those. Let me come around. I'll do it on this side, so hopefully you can see a little better. And now when I crank this up, it gets tight, and I'm going to squeeze these together, dress that up a bit. There, that looks nice. Now as I tighten this, it pulls that in. I don't know if you can see it. It's sucking it into the hose right now. And then when I get it as tight as I want, I flip that over. And now that is band clamped on there. Then I just push those down. I like that because there's nothing to catch on. That is super tight, very strong. That is not coming off. So that's stainless steel wire. That's a permanent band on there. The only way to get that off would be to cut these wires. I've got this piece of fake copper-clad aluminum electrical cable from a previous video. So let me show you how the actual Clamp-Tite brand thing works. It is easier to use. They make a big one for bigger wire, but I just made mine. But you make a loop like that, go around. Now this is much smaller wire, and I do like their little tool for the small wire. And like I said, I think they make a large format version too. You can actually go around again. So same thing, their tool goes, this little roll pin goes underneath and that goes on top. The only difference is theirs you wrap around here, wrap around here, and you twist these together, and when you turn this nut on the back, this little T-bar, it tightens this up. And you can dress those up and make them all pretty. I mean, it looks really complicated right now, but it's really quite easy. So tighten it as much as you want. It lets you put a fair amount of torque on that. You'll see it's pulling in on that. And then when you flip it over, it makes a pretty sharp bend here. So now you can, I'm going to cut this long. Makes a pretty sharp bend so it stays nicely. And then you've got these two pieces sticking up. Just bend them down on the inside. Yeah, I could have straightened this up, but that's how that works. I can't now because it's pretty well embedded in there. You'll see it's definitely embedded inside the wire. Sorry, I was out of frame there. Yeah, so this won't catch on anything. It's nice and tight. I could have straightened these up when I was putting it on. I should have, just to make it nice and pretty, but that's a nice clamp. And you can get a whole bunch of these out of a little bit of wire. You can use baling wire. We have sheep, so we get orchard grass 3-wire bales all the time, and a lot of them come with strings now, but if you get wire, baling wire works well, but I do like the stainless steel aircraft wire. This one is easier to take apart. The other one, you got to unwind it. My homemade one, you got to unwind the wire and pull it out of the holes. But this thing works well. It's nothing fancy. I just plasma cut it out of a sheet of steel. I had some scrap. And then this is the smaller version. Same thing, a couple holes in a bolt, the roll pin, piece of metal with a little notch on the front. Super simple. Here's one I put in a Freightliner bus, just as an example. Just change the mount a little bit, and it fits right in there. The wind has calmed down a bit, so I've got the line runs from the fuel pump down here. That's the in, that's the out. I just put the filter on there. It just slides onto this post. There's a grommet that normally stays in the filter. And the filter comes with new O-rings too. So I'll put a new O-ring in the cap and put the cap on. All right, it's installed, the cap's on, brand new filter. I'm going to take the top cap off and then fill this up with, you could fill it with diesel. I have automatic transmission fluid, like I mentioned in my other video about priming a bus. Now, remember earlier I said that during operation, the diesel fuel will be down, it'll start down near the ring there. But we're going to fill this up, which will help with prime, and then once it's running, I'll pop the cap and loosen it and let the fuel level drop down. One thing I like about these, if you can install them like where I did here, this is actually even with or slightly above the level of the fuel pump. The fuel pump is back in there. I don't know if you can see that little silver fitting. So this is actually above the fuel pump, which will help with prime. The fuel pump doesn't work very well when it's got just air, but once it gets some liquid in it, then it'll prime and start pulling and pull fuel up through the other line from the tank. Okay, I've got no block heater in here, so this is an absolute cold start. And of course, we drain the fuel out of the fuel pump. So we'll see what it'll take to get her going. And then once it's running, and I know it's running and fully primed, I'll let it run for about 5 minutes. Then we will adjust the level of the fuel in that Davco filter, and we're golden. It's definitely pulling fuel, and that white smoke shows me I'm getting some fuel into the chambers. Alright, I just stopped it manually so I can fill this up. It did pull, all of this is the volume it took to suck out of the fuel line, and I want to make sure we got plenty of room for any other air bubbles that might burp through. You'll hear this click, so you just go till it clicks. 1974 Crown bus that I got out of a salvage yard. So now I'm just going to crack this. It's been running for about 5 minutes, just idling. Going to crack this, which now you'll see the fuel drop. And I want to bring it down to just above this ring here. As the filter gets dirtier, the fuel level will climb higher and higher. When it gets up to here, then I change